Hello, my name is Voya and welcome to my deep guide, and in today's video I wanted to check something out. I was feeling nerdy, so I wanted to collect some data and analyze it. If I collected the data over time in different categories and I did the price inflation adjustment to today's money, I was interested to see if and what those price trends would reveal. Are we paying more for the devices now, or are we feeling the effects of global inflation? And what type of value do these devices represent? And finally, I wanted to analyze and see from this data what would be the best value devices in different categories that you can currently get. But before we dive into all of that data goodness, I wanted to invite you to go to mydeepguide.com/shop, and there you can find MDO and MMP, both of which are hyperlinked workbooks which are there to help you organize all of your, in the case of My Daily Organizer or MDO, your yearly, quarterly, weekly, monthly, daily organizing and or journaling needs. And in the case of MMP, My Deep Guide Meeting Planner, it's there to simplify, centralize and organize all of your meeting planning needs. You can find more information for both of these products in the description below, and just know that purchasing any of these products directly helps support independence of My Deep Guide. Now, let's dive in and see what the data reveals. Let's start with the e-reader categories of up to 8-inch screen diagonal size. I've collected a lot of data for most of the meaningful and impactful producers and devices on the e-ink market. I've tried to go historically all the way down to the first devices that the manufacturer has released. But just as an example here, with the Kindle devices, you can see that we're starting with the Kindle back in 2007, which was a 6-inch device with 256 megabytes of storage. And in the case of Kindle, I have collected both prices without ads and the with ads, but the only ones that I'm going to be focusing on are without ads, because that is a true reflection of what the device actually is. As you can see, we have without ads price here, and you have the inflation adjusted price column here, where I use the latest up-to-date inflation adjustment prices on the March 17th. That's when the data was collected. So this data will change absolutely on a day-to-day basis, but the variations shouldn't be too drastic compared to March 17th. And you can see that we go all the way down to Colorsoft. This type of data collection and sorting has been done for Kindle devices, Kobo devices, PocketBook devices, Remarkable, Supernote and Boox devices. So those are the ones that I focused on, which are the most wildly popular. This data set, I believe, is sufficient to show us the trend and to give us some more meaningful insights into how is the value of an average e-ink device in different categories. How has it changed, and has it changed over the years? Let's start with the Kindle Basic, which is their 6-inch entry-level e-reader device. And you can see that it was the first device that was launched, and when it was launched, the inflation-adjusted prices is that it launched to a price equivalent of $614 worth today, which would be a ludicrous amount of money to pay for a 6-inch device today if it launched in any circumstances. What we can see is that over time, as more people adopted this technology, it made more sense to produce more and therefore make more cost-effective production processes. And that means that Kindle 2 went down to $534 equivalent today. And then when we went to Kindle Keyboard, it was all the way down to $276. Then we had Kindle 4 and Kindle Touch hovering at around $150 and $197-ish, with Kindle 5 basically establishing finally what the price range would be for the Kindle Basic line of devices. Because from Kindle 5 all the way down to Kindle 11, we can see remarkable consistency of the price or the value when it's inflation adjusted, and it hovers somewhere between $125 and $136. So that means that the overall value price of the Kindle Basic line, once it has established itself in the market, or the market has established itself, is at around $130. Kindle Colorsoft is included here simply because it stands basically on its own. Technically, it would maybe make more sense to put it in the Kindle Paperwhite category, but it's just there to kind of show, hey, this is the evolution of things. We had our Kindle Basic, and then we had Kindle Colorsoft at $222. Speaking of Kindle Paperwhite, that is their second line of devices that has been established. And Paperwhite 1 basically came out when Kindle 5, was it, also came out. That also established. So at right around that time, they kind of figured it out. Okay, so I think it was 2012 or something like that. They kind of figured out, okay, we need this line of devices, that line of devices, and we're going to keep the price pretty much on check. And you can definitely see that nowhere as strongly as with the Kindle Paperwhite, because from the emergence of Paperwhite 1 all the way now to the 6th generation that was recently launched, you can see that the price, when inflation adjusted, is extremely consistent, somewhere at around $190. That is a very strong showing of a healthy and good mindset with the Amazon as a company, and figuring out, all right, this is our price model, we're going to adjust it according to what the market is saying, but the absolute value is going to be something that is equivalent to or around $190 today. Amazon also had other approaches and attempts at different types of lines of devices, most particularly with Oasis. But first they tried with the Voyage at $295, and that never got like a successor. But Kindle Oasis started super strong at $410, equivalent of money today. And then they had Oasis 2 and Oasis 3, and you can see a price dropping trend. So something that is fairly different than what we've seen with the Kindle Basic and Kindle Paperwhite. Oasis 3 was the last Oasis that Kindle has released. And I think that this price trend simply shows that this was not a cost-effective device line that made sense for Amazon for some reason, probably the profit margin. Because this indication is an anomaly when compared to their maintaining and strong lines, which are the Basic and the Paperwhite. Kobo devices had a far more chaotic type of line of devices when you look at it throughout history. So let's start with the 6-inch devices, and then you can see that we had Kobo eReader and Kobo Wi-Fi that launched basically at the same time for the same price, and the launch price was equivalent of $291. So fairly high. Already their next line of devices, the Touch and Geo, are all the way down to $182, which kind of makes sense because they wanted to compete with, or had to compete with, the Kindle line of devices. Then they also tried, hey, let's see with the Kobo Mini and see what happens there. They tried to replicate that with the Kobo Touch 2.0, but you can see through this whole line of devices here, that's basically just a mess of trying to figure stuff out until it finally starts to kind of narrow down at a later point of time, but it's fairly difficult to find a consistent business model and consistent line of devices, certainly not as consistent as with the Kindle line of devices. At a later point in time, Kobo introduced the 7-inch lineup of devices as well. First, we had 3 models of Aura representing Kobo's 7-inch reader screens or devices, and that changed into the Libra, which is now going here. But the price range was fairly similar, with Aura being slightly higher at around 200 and let's say $35 as an average, with the Libra H2O, Libra 2, both being almost exactly the same, which is absolutely phenomenal to see how exact the price is when adjusted to inflation, because Libra 1 or H2O was $210.93 equivalent of today's money, and Libra 2, which was released a little bit later, was equivalent to 210, again the same, 0.78 US dollars. So you can see the same type of mentality going here as well, with the exception that the Kobo Libra collar is at 222 US dollars, meaning right there with the Kindle collar soft. Finally, Kobo also ventured into the 8-inch e-reader screen category, and there things are fairly more different because we have one Aura model, one Forma model, and one Kobo Sage, which is also doubling as a writer as well, or an eNote device, with all of them hovering at around 305 to 316 US dollars. So again, a fairly consistent price range for a specific category of devices present here on Kobo as well. Unfortunately, Kobo has a more chaotic line of devices, so they don't have, other than Clara and Libra currently, those would be their equivalents of Clara competing with Kindle Basic and Libra competing with the Paperwhite. And you can see a slightly different type of a trend than what we see with the Kindle. Well, with the Kindle Basic, for example, we had fairly consistent prices with incremental increase in what is being offered as value for those devices as technology improves. You get an improved screen panel, you get like more storage and things like that, but at a fairly consistent price. With the Kobo Clara, we actually see a meaningful price decline while offering those same advantages. So when we see like Clara HD starting at 151 bucks, then Clara 2E 140, with Kobo Clara Black and White, their latest Black and White edition, 131 US dollars. So you can see that the price is actually has a tendency of dropping with the Kobo Clara, which means that it's increasing in value, or what it offers, for the same amount of money or less when compared to their previous generations of the same device. And we also have the Kobo Clara collar, which is at 151 US dollars, naturally more expensive than the black and white version, but the difference is basically just 20 bucks. So it's not something that I would consider outrageous. Oof. Next in line are Boox devices, and I've collected all the way from i62 back in 2012 all the way down to today, and these are again devices in the category up to 8-inch, primarily eReader devices, although here we have the Nova lineup as well, which is more on eNote, so that's going to be a separate one. So let's dig in and see what kind of patterns can we see from Boox's lineup of devices, because here it's a little bit of a different story, as you might expect. So in the category of Boox 6-inch devices-ish, right? So not only 6-inch, but ones that are a little bit smaller and a little bit larger, we have quite a few devices. And as you can see from the chart, it's basically all over the place, and it doesn't really offer meaningful trends or predictions that we can find, because this is basically a full-on chaos, if I may characterize it like that. The 6-inch range here is from 138 US dollars for the Poke 1 generation that came out, all the way up to 293 US dollars for the Palma, which is 6.13-inch type of e-reader device. Still just focused on e-reader. Yes, it has a different housing and some different types of technologies, but the price difference in a similar type of category is enormous. The most meaningful product line in the 6-inch category that Boox has for pure e-readers are the Poke devices. And here we have a complete opposite from what we've seen with Kindle and Kobo, because Poke 1 started at 138 US dollars, Poke Pro then comes with 189 US dollars, with Poke 2 going up to $234, almost $100 more than the Poke 1. And don't get me wrong, I love the Poke 2. I still have it to this day. Since when it came out, I bought it, and I still have it and love that device. But it is absolutely ridiculous to see just how big of a price jump it is from in the same category of devices. Then we get Poke 2 Color, which was a prototype that was basically sold for 283 bucks with zero support. So that was completely ridiculous. So then we go back to Poke 3, which was released in the same year as Poke 2, just in November. Of course, at the same price here as well. Then we follow with Poke 4 Lite, which drops it all the way down to 163 bucks. Poke 5 goes a little bit up, 188. And then we have Go 6, which is basically Poke 6. It has been just renamed and rebranded into Go 6 only on the box, because the device is exactly the same as Poke 6, the housing and everything else. And now it holds a price of $152 US. So from this chart, you can actually see that the perceived chaos of Boox's business strategy, product lineup strategy, and pricing models is not just perceived. It is a factual kind of thing, because in one product line of devices, in the same category of devices, to have so much variation without offering such a huge level of different performance upgrades or technological upgrades, it's just pure chaos. When we take a look at the 7-inch e-reader line of devices from Boox, we get to see a more coherent type of behavior. And T68 was a 6.8-inch device that was released a long time ago, so it is just there technically because it falls into this category, but doesn't really fall into this line of devices, which is for all intents and purposes, let's call it the Leaf line of devices, because it started with the Leaf 1 and it had a really high price at $353 equivalent in today's money. Just remember that these price ranges are equivalent of today's money, inflation adjusted. Then we had the successor, which was Leaf 2, which improved some of the things, but still commanded a really high price. And while Leaf introduced as a concept, like as a reader, some really good ergonomic and functionalities, better screen functionalities, the internals were dreadfully slow, and Leaf 1 and 2 were just simply not good devices, especially not at that price. They were not that good. But then a couple of years later, we got Page, which improved the performance problems that Leaf had, 1 and 2, and at the same time it slashed the price all the way down to $261. So now you've suddenly had like a much more modern device at a much better price as well in the same line of devices, with the last one being introduced, the Go Color 7. So this time it's a color panel, but unlike what we've seen as a trend in the Kobo and Kindle devices, the Go Color is actually even cheaper than its black and white older predecessor, the Page. And here we have the Boox 8-inch category technically there only because of the ancient AI86 model, which released long time ago. But for all intents and purposes, this table concerns the Nova line of devices, and that is not a pure e-reader device. That is not just a 7.8-inch device, but it's also a eNote taking device, because all of the Novas are equipped with an EMR stylus capability. So they are also eNote takers as well as e-readers, which of course will drive the price way up. So we see that the Nova, when it launched as a line, started at $367. Then the Nova Pro followed with $386, with Nova 2 and 3 coming out basically in 2020. Again, you had the situation with Poke 2 and Nova 2 coming out at the beginning of the year, and Poke 3 and Nova 3 coming out at the end of the same years, and they were selling at the same price. And they were, for all intents and purposes, the same device, just with the updated SoC that gave you a newer version of the Android OS. That was it. They were the same thing, but the price was $420 or $19. So we have this ascending price for new devices here that were not really offering that much more value as for the price increase that we've seen here. Then we had Nova 3 Color, which went up all the way to a price equivalent of $494 for a 7.8-inch device, which was completely ridiculous. And then we had the introduction of the Nova Air line, which I really like. And for me, Nova Air 1 was the still the best or one of the best Nova 7.8-inch devices that came out in general as an eNote taking device as well. When it launched, it followed the trend of the Nova 3 and Nova 2 at $412, but then we also had Nova Air C, the color version, which was a little bit more expensive, but not as expensive as the Nova 3 Color. So we have a descending range, slightly descending price range here, with the Nova Air 3 price equivalent of $370. So we're starting to see this descending kind of a range, but then comes in Tab Mini C, which objectively introduces a lot of technological advantages and values, but at also a much higher price with the $471. So from this range, again, we can see this kind of chaos and no specific mindset or a business model or a trend or anything really. It's just spaghetti on the wall and let's see what happens. How much did it cost? This much. Inflation adjustment considerations, none are there. So that's basically what the data exposes here as well. While we're talking about the 7.8-inch range of devices that are eNote takers, we have to talk about the Supernote A6 line of devices. And thankfully there's only 3 models here. We had the original A6 Android, which launched at a price equivalent of $373. Then we had the A6X, which is what Android version of it, which was at $469. And interestingly to see is that many years later, when the A6X2 launched, the base price is virtually identical to the base price of the A6X at $470. So yes, vastly expensive, but we can see that there is consistency in the pricing of the line of models as far as Supernote goes. Oof. And then we get to PocketBook. PocketBook was a huge mess. And not only do they have like an insane amount of devices on par, if not even more than Boox, as at least in this category, like up to 8-inch devices, but the lineup is just pure chaos. But there is some consistency, so let's explore. I'm just going to include this full range here for anyone who may be interested to kind of analyze these values. And we can start with the PocketBook Basic, which, like the Kobo Clara and Kindle Basic, is your run-of-the-mill 6-inch e-reader device. And we can see, although with less consistency with like we've seen with the Kindle, but there is definitely a consistent type of price range from the Basic New, Basic 2, all the way down to Basic 4 versions of the models, with a slight descending trend of the pricing. And the newest device offers the newest technology and basically most value. So you get the best of the technology for the least amount of money. Similar, but even more apparent, is the trend in the Touch Lux line of devices. It started with the Touch, just called Touch, $222. And you can see that every subsequent generation of devices, Touch Lux 2, 4, and 5, the price is going down when adjusted for inflation, right? With the latest one, the Touch Lux 5, being at $153. The same type of trend of value increasing over time for the amount of money that you pay for a device like this continues in this case as well. I find it really interesting what this data collection and analyzing of these trends actually exposes, because it shows when a company has a good and stable product that sells well, then you have trends that you can see, and then you have these experimentations where there's no real trend. There's quite a bit of fluctuation. And here we have Touch HD, Touch HD 2, and Touch HD 3 basically varying from $226, $216, and then going up to $241. And this kind of inconsistency can usually be an indication when a company is going to do a reevaluation of a product line and say like, hey, we either need to change something drastically or we're going to cut the product line because this is kind of meandering all the way around. And then we get to the up to and including 8-inch screens e-readers from PocketBook. And here we have also this kind of meandering type of thing, with starting with the Color Lux at $342, and then it basically comes down to InkPad being the line of devices used. With some consistency, $310, $305 back then in InkPad 1 and 2 days, but then InkPad 3 went up to $317, and the InkPad 3 Pro, which basically offers a little bit more storage, is all the way up to $350. So some pricing inconsistency and the value proposition actually dropping with the InkPad series of devices. Now we get to the interesting one, which are the 10-ish inch category of eNote devices. So these are no longer just e-reader devices, these are e-readers and note-taking devices. We start, as before, with the Kindle, and we can see that before, Kindle DX was not an e-note taker. It was a dedicated e-reader. It was very, very old, but it was super expensive, and back then it offered the biggest screen, right? So therefore the price was equivalent of $727 US. When we get down to Kindle Scribe, which are basically the identical type of device with some minor improvements here, really not something that you can feel or count as a measurable value increase. The only measurable value increase is here that the pricing has been adjusted in some way, and these are prices for the 64 gigabyte versions, right? So both are 64 gigs versions, inflation adjusted prices, not the discounts. And you can see that the new Kindle Scribe offers a little bit more value than the original Scribe, because we have 457 versus 468 bucks. In the 10-inch eNote category of devices, Kobo only released 2 devices, Kobo Ellipsa 1, which started at $471 US, and then you have Kobo Ellipsa 2E, which was at equivalent of $418 US. And here we have a significant increase in value, because not only is Kobo Ellipsa 2 significantly cheaper when prices are adjusted for inflation, but it also offered a lot more value because it was improved considerably, although not enough in all of the aspects, but there were significant improvements to Kobo Ellipsa 1. Then we get to the smorgasbord of devices and the range of devices from Boox in the 10-inch category. And here I'm just showing all of them here as a reference point for somebody who's going to be interested. But like before, I'm going to be focusing on the specific product lines. And Boox Note was the first device that started to represent 10.3-inch eNote taking devices for Boox. And the original Note launched at a really high $698 equivalent value, with the Note S, the cut down version, being at $508. But the successor to the Note Pro, which had more storage and a little bit more improvements, was actually even more, like almost $750 US, which was like an insane amount of money. So then we had like a little bit of meandering there. However, since the introduction of Note 2, then we had Note 3, and then Note 4 was skipped, and then we had Note 5, we had a fairly consistent trend with a tendency for the price to drop. With the Note 2 starting 685, then 678, and then 647 for the Note 5, which was the best version of the Note. So you got the best version of the line of the devices that was the newest, which was cheapest, which again makes perfect sense. Sometime later they introduced the variant of the 10.3-inch devices, which was Note Air, and it was running in parallel with the Note, and it was a little bit cheaper and a little bit lower spec, mainly in storage as far as storage goes. But there were significant differences between the two. And Note Air as a line is far more consistent. Again, it shows that when a line of devices is successful, then you can make a prediction and you can see what is going to happen. So you can see that Note Air 1 launched at $591, then Note Air 2 a little bit cheaper, then Note Air 2 Plus a little bit cheaper still, Note Air 3C, which was an introduction of a color panel. So normally you would expect this to be a significant price jump, but no. Actually, it was a significant price down when compared to the Note Air 2 Plus, with the Note Air 3, the monochromatic version, going down even still. The logical jump would be from Note Air 2 Plus at $577 down to $502 for the Note Air 3. And then we have the Note Air 4C and the Note Air 3C, and we have that tendency of the price dropping even further still, with Note Air 4C being the cheapest variation of the Note Air devices that was basically released. When compared to Note Air 3, it's on par, but it is a color version as well, and it has significant improvements over all of the previous ones. However, there is one glaring misfit in this whole thing, a true disruptor, if I may call it like that, and that is the Go 10.3. I include the Go 10.3 in the Note Air line technically because it does fit that mentality. So it's a portable one, it's not super duper spec, and it is affordable. And when we're talking affordable, Go 10.3 absolutely annihilates all of the competition because it goes down to $386 equivalent of, And that simply makes it like an unbeatable value for your money, not just in the Boox range, but pretty much overall. Boox also had the Tab Ultra line of devices, which was an experimental one. And here you can see that kind of inconsistency, again rearing its head. So Tab Ultra started $650. Then we had the trend with, like we've seen with the Note Air, with the Tab Ultra C actually being cheaper than the Tab Ultra, than the monochromatic version of it. So it was as powerful, but it had a color screen, which was traditionally more expensive, but not really when prices were adjusted for inflation. And then we had the Tab Ultra C Pro, which was the last one that was released, which amped up the price, but mainly because its internals are considerably more powerful and valuable when compared to the Tab Ultra C. So the prices here do make sense, but I get the feeling that the Tab Ultra is not really a consistent line of devices that Boox has kind of zeroed in on. And it's not really a guarantee that we're going to see another Tab Ultra come out under that name or following the similar type of mentality. With the Supernote, we see a similar trend, but something a little bit more interesting. And that is that when the original A5 launched, that's the Linux version, it was $438, and then the A5X was $581. So the jump was actually more than the difference that you saw between A6 and A6X. However, what I find really interesting is that the pricing of the A5X2, it is far more aggressive than the pricing of the Nomad was. So the A6 X2 price was, when inflation, when the price was adjusted for inflation, was more or less the same as the A6X when it launched. That is not the case with the A5X2, at it actually being considerably lower, equivalent of $120 cheaper than the A5X, which means that the A5X2, as pricey as it is, objectively it is pricey, but it does offer a better value than what A5X did when it launched back in the day. PocketBook was mainly focusing on 10-inch e-readers with some quasi note-taking kind of thing. That is getting there. Now it's getting there a little bit with more modern devices, but mostly the whole platform is like really not that well suited for note-taking devices or note-taking purposes. So they probably should be considered as primarily as e-readers. This is just a general overview of the prices that are in this category, but I'm going to be focusing on a specific lineup, and that basically is the InkPad again. Although we have InkPad in the lower categories, so the naming is really weird. So we have InkPad at 500, InkPad X at 524, then the InkPad Lite, which was like $200 less. Then we go up for the InkPad X Pro, which is cheaper than the InkPad X, so that's a better increase in value. Then you had Color Note, which was even less than this, but then you had InkPad EO, which is the latest one with a price increase. So here we get to see that like seesawing and no clear pattern that we can see from the PocketBook in the 10-inch category of devices. Remarkable is a very interesting one to see. They only have 3 products. So Remarkable One, which when it launched, so not as a Kickstarter, but at retail price, it was the equivalent of $781 US, which for a device that was so limited is an absolute obscene amount of money if you would kind of consider it like that. Then you had Remarkable 2, which is granted their absolutely biggest success, and it makes sense. Not only was an improved SoC and design, but overall it was perceived as a much more valuable and fashionable and kind of classy kind of thing for objectively a lot less money. And now we have the introduction of the Remarkable Paper Pro, which at its base, so I'm just using the core base prices here, not jumbling up all the accessories, same as with the Supernote. We have the equivalent of $589 US, which is definitely a jump. But then again, Paper Pro is offering more advanced technology, more storage, more processing power, more of everything. However, that new screen technology, while technically impressive and important, and I still maintain that it is important and impressive, for the end user, is it a real value increase objectively? I would be inclined to say that in a general, objective way, no. I don't think that the advantages that the technology brings are worth the shortcomings that it also introduces. And in the 13.3-inch class of devices, I'm focusing only on Boox devices. And yes, I know there's definitely Sony DPT devices, and there's definitely Quaderno, and there's also QuirkLogic Paper, which has since been discontinued, but all of them are basically Sony devices. And they fall into the same type of price range category. They don't really deviate that much from what the Boox devices represent here. So for simplicity, I just didn't want to duplicate too much data here and focus on one, because it basically shows a trend and shows something that is really, really important. So let's see and analyze the data here. We have the introduction of Max at $930 US, then Max Carta $976, then Max 2 going up still, $1,016. Max 3 up further still, $1,073 US. Max Lumi even higher, $1,084. We're almost at $1,100 US with the Max Lumi, until it finally starts to drop down with Max Lumi 2, down to $1,036, then Tab X, which objectively offered far more than any of its predecessors, and we're going down to the lowest price, lower than the launch price of the initial one, the Max, and that was like super cool, but still $920 US, significant investment, until another disruptor is introduced by the Boox, and that is the Note Max, because it offers the most advanced, the biggest value, 300 ppi, 13.3-inch e-ink screen, excellent SoC, excellent storage, all of these things excellent, at a price of $661 US, equivalent to inflation adjustment. And that itself not only represents the best value 13.3-inch device ever released, but in my opinion, I think that the Note Max represents the best value device that has ever been released overall in all categories of devices as far as e-ink and e-paper devices are concerned. As I said, my opinion only, based on this data analysis that I've been doing here. All right, so now that we have that type of perspective of the value and the pricing and the trends and all that kind of stuff, let's see what would represent the best value in these different categories. In the category of best value 6-inch-ish type of an e-reader, I would place Boox Go 7 Color as place number 1, or if you are not into color devices, then I would definitely recommend to go with the Go 6. Why am I not choosing Kindle or a Kobo device? Even though I personally prefer Kobo devices, and you can check in one of my videos when I compared, for example, different color devices, I prefer Kobo's execution, Kobo's front light, Kobo's quality, all that kind of stuff. I do prefer it. However, you cannot overlook the fact that either with Kindle or with Kobo, you are locked down into one ecosystem and one ecosystem alone, and those systems are very, very rigid. In the case of Kindle, extremely rigid and becoming even more rigider. And this is the main reason why my pick for the best value would be either Boox Go 7 Color or the Boox Go 6, for the reason alone that not only are you free to install any library app or anything like that, all of these are Google Play certified devices, so you can use and install Google Play apps on them, but also you can install Kindle and or Kobo and have all of that actually combined in one device. And as such, despite the negative aspects that absolutely go hand in hand with Boox devices, yeah, the positives overshadow that in the context of value. So value for your money, considering that you get access to any platform that you want, it's very difficult to ignore or defeat either of these two devices. As far as the 7.8-inch category of eNote taking devices go, I offer something maybe surprising. I will maintain that there are no good value products on the market today in that category. So if you're looking for a 7.8-inch eNote taking device, there are no devices out there that represent a good value. Let me explain what do I mean. ePaper is cheap, but it's no good. Bigme as a brand, I do not recommend in general. Kobo Sage, well, an excellent device, has an abysmal battery life and it's terrible at handwriting. Boox Note Air 2, while overall a very good device, it's very dated at this point. Tab Mini C, excellent device, but it's way too heavy and way too expensive. And the Supernote Nomad or the A6X2, while that would be my pick from all of this bunch, it still cannot possibly be recommended as a good value because it's way too expensive. Then we go to the 10-inch eNote device categories. And while I've offered my commentary on the price range changes and the tendencies, one of the things that's important to mention in this category, which is not true of the previous one, is that the advancements that the technology has offered over time, especially in the last couple of years, are significantly higher than what we've had for the sub 10.3 inch devices. And mainly these reflect in pen latency figures, or the handwriting latency, which has improved drastically over the last 4 years, for example. In the last 2 years alone, we've had a jump from 227 ppi to 300 ppi, introduction of color screens, significant improvements in deghosting and screen refresh rates, and the overall advancements of the panels themselves becoming better overall. And in this category, the situation is extremely simple, because if what you're looking for is which device offers the best value in this category of devices, it is without any shadow of a doubt Boox Go 10.3. It cannot be disputed and it cannot be defeated because, yeah, it is the absolute best value proposition in this category. And then we get to the 13.3 inch category devices, and here, the trend was showing significant, for the longest time we had significant price increase without any meaningful technological improvements or advancements. So we had like technological stagnation while the prices were going up and up, which led a lot of people to actually genuinely, and rightfully so, wonder whether or not 13.3 inch panels and devices are going to be produced at all in the future or not, which was a genuine concern for me, because what I was looking for most of all was a good, really good but affordable 13.3 inch device, and that simply didn't exist until the Boox Note Max, which marks a really important turning point, redefining this category of devices in both terms of technology and value. The best value pick for this category is a no-brainer as well, because Boox Note Max is it. However, I would also venture my personal subjective input into the matter here, and I would add one more thing. In my opinion, Boox Note Max stands as the best value e-ink device, not only in the category of 13.3 inch device and not only as a Boox device, but in overall category of all devices that have been throughout time. I think that the Boox Note Max represents simply a culmination of both technology and value. However, you have to be aware of the negative sides or the caveats, such as no front light and that it is a rather large device. But considering that you're looking at a 13.3 inch device, you can't really have it as a small one, can you? In summary, I would offer just one more bit of caution or advice, and that is that the video and the analysis here focuses on the best value proposition. However, the best value is something that will not mean the same thing from person to person. It definitely doesn't have to mean that the best value device is the best device for your needs. It simply means that these are devices that offer most of everything for the price. Value as a term will hold a different meaning from person to person. For example, ease of use will hold different value from one person to another person. And if you value ease of use higher than anything else, well, that will naturally lower the perceived value of all Boox devices, and therefore your considerations will have to be fairly different. And that means that any and all Boox devices would be penalized for that ease of use, which would affect the results reflected here in this video. So you have to take that into account as well. I would like to wrap up with sharing with you my own personal choices for each of these categories. For an e-reader, my personal choice would be Kobo Sage. Best value 10-inch eNote device would be Go 10.3. Best 13.3-inch would be definitely Boox Note Max. And the best all-rounder for me would be Boox Note Max. I hope that you enjoyed the video and that you found it informative and or interesting. Please do let me know what you think about this video format and share with me your thoughts on this subject and on this analysis. I'm also interested to hear from you what constitutes value in the context of these devices. What constitutes value for you? And I'm also interested to hear, are there any other trend analysis that you may be interested to see on my deep guide? Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you in the next video. Bye!